Action.
Shalom, welcome to MAOHR TORAH's Thursday night Jewish Ethics, Mesilat Yesherim, and Modern Halacha. And I want to thank my dear friend Shalom Torbati for giving me the idea, and also Rabbi Machto for giving me the idea to record. And we're going to start. Okay, we're learning Mesilat Yesherim and the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Lutzato. We're in the Hakdama, into the introduction of the Sefer. So the Ramchal says, "V'tirei im titbonen behovaya berov haolam ki rov anshe hasechel ma'ipechim." He says most of the very, very smart people, they can get a PhD. You can get a PhD in almost anything. You know that,
Right.
So science, philosophy, architecture, whatever you like. And some people, they go into such nitty-gritty details, like even diamond cutting, and even people, they go even to the holier endeavors, like the Torah. They do pilpul. You know what pilpul is?
No, most people.
In yeshiva, like on the Talmud, they discuss, they go into such like Rashi and Tosfot and Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and then it's mental gymnastics. They keep on going, asking more questions, going more deeper on the Talmud or on Halacha or on Midrash. But it says there's very few people that devote time to see what is it to be a perfect person. Because, right, what are we trying to say here? And you wanted me to talk about Gilgul, and Belineda we will. The Ramchal wrote a book, How to Attain Spiritual Perfection. So much so that if you work on yourself, you could get to a madriga of Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh is like a spark of prophecy. We know, unfortunately, since we don't have the Holy Temple, we don't have prophets anymore. So even if somebody is a super, super duper Sadiq, it's very difficult for him to become a prophet, get prophecy. But there are people alive today, like I told you the story about Ben Ishchai last week, that they have been so meticulous and careful and worked on their midot, characteristics, and they have so much fear and love of heaven that they have this sixth sense, that they could tell the future, Ruach HaKodesh. They know what's going, a lot of things that are going on. And some very special people, Eliyahu HaNavi, just like, Eliyahu HaNavi came and told all the secrets to Rashbi. Like one of the most important things that we have to know, so many different terrible things happen. Like this Chabad rabbi that just passed away yesterday morning. He was only 36 years old. Assistant rabbi at the Chabad Persian Youth, 7 young kids. So we become, some people, it becomes so perplexing for them that they just can't take it. But that's why Ben Ishchai and Kabbalah, the Arizal says one of the most important things to understand, one of the rules of the universe in order for you to be able to live here and understand all these perplexing and mysterious things is Gilgul. We don't know. Maybe he was such a Sadiq that all he needed in this world, in this time back, was 36 years. So he made his tikkun, unfortunately for his wife and kids, but he didn't need to stay here anymore longer. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, every day for those 12, 13 years, Eliyahu HaNavi would come and teach him the secrets of the Torah, and he wrote the Zohar. And, one of the amazing things the Zohar taught us was about this idea of Gilgul. A lot of things happen in this world, not because of what's going on. It's not payback for your current life, but it's to rectify your sins of the previous life. But there are people like me and you that are living in our generation that through the study of Jewish ethics, Musar, and through the study of Kabbalah and this, of being so careful in all their actions, they can merit that Eliyahu HaNavi. Like they say, the great Rabbi Eliashiv, one of the Gedolim that just passed away a few years ago, he had Gilui Eliyahu. The Shamish of the Ben Ishchai, Rabbeinu Yosef Chaim, he said Eliyahu HaNavi would visit him on almost a daily.
Wow.
The Ramchal wrote this book, Mesilat Yesherim, how you can climb that ladder. So it's terribly, terribly difficult, but for those that are willing to make the effort, the payback, if you can bring it to fruition, is awesome. It's unbelievable. It's beyond this world. It's something that we can't even explain through physical. So the Ramchal says that there's very few people that, I'm a CPA also, besides being a rabbi. There a lot of people, one of the things in CPA is auditing. You go deep into the business to make sure that, nothing, there's separations of duties, nobody's stealing, it's being the most efficient as possible. So the Ramchal says it's unfortunate that very few people, they spend time to try to audit their life to see if their service of God is at the most perfect and efficient way it can be. You understand? Because according to Kabbalah, if we have deficiencies in our characteristics, like if somebody doesn't have self-control, or somebody is, what the worst idol worship is, it says in the Zohar?
What?
When you worship yourself, your ego. That blocks the light of the Shekhinah. That's why the Rambam says, it's no coincidence that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet of all time, and he was the most humble. So, when you read the Torah, we know for sure. It says clearly in the Torah that Moshe's Bechol Avdinem Manu, right? One of the foundations of Judaism is what? That nobody, even Mashiach, nobody has, and nobody ever will reach the clarity of prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. And the same thing is, not even Mashiach. And we know that Moshe is the most humble. So the Rambam in his introduction to Pirkei Avot in Shmona Prakim says this is no coincidence. When you have an ego, you're full of vanity and full of self-worship. It's like it's blocking the light of Shekh for you to talk to God, right? The more you self-worship, the further away you're from God, and God, it's a blockage that God can't reveal himself to you. The more you break down your ego, the more you're breaking down those barriers. So it's no coincidence that Moshe is the greatest, he's the most humble. That's why he deserves to be the greatest prophet. Because there's not anything blocking, there's no blockage. There's not, have you ever tried to see when it's foggy?
You can see the sun.
Right, you can't see the sun when it's foggy. So the same thing, if we, Lahavdil Elfei Avdalot, say that the Shekhinah is like a sun type of light, when you have self-worship and ego. So the Ramchal is basically writing this book, how we can achieve spiritual perfection. Break down our ego, break down all our deficiencies. Like, one of the worst things that I tell myself is laziness. That's why the first chapter, after he talks about why we were created, he talks about how to be careful not to do sin, zehirut, and then after that he talks about zerizut, which means being swift. To run to do what? A mitzvah. These are the first steps of the ladder. Then it gets more advanced. Then it goes to how to be pure and how to be nikyut, how to be clean from any sin, and how to be humble and how to have fear of heaven and how to have love of heaven. But it's how to be pure, tahara. It's a long ladder that we have to climb. So he says at this point in stage that there's unfortunately very few people that want to look very deeply, contemplate on how to have perfect service of Hashem, right? It's not, of course, if you talk to any Sadiq, any Chacham, he'll say, of course, love and fear of heaven, and this is the whole enchilada. This is what it's all about. That my service of God shouldn't have any deficiencies. And it's true. But but he says, why? So why don't you devote a special time to clarify if you are really where you're deficient? So I want to give my thing as a CPA to audit yourself. Hey, am I too lazy? Am I too not careful in this? Do I have too much of an ego? It's self-auditing. And then the more we work on ourselves and work on ourselves and break down, try to get to perfection, that's what you were talking about, Gilgul. There's two good things. You get to Ruach HaKodesh, which is awesome. You're so close to God that you have this sixth sense and you can really bless and guide other people. Like,
is there also miracles as well, Rabbi?
Yeah. I tell you, there's somebody, I named my son after him. And I tell all my students, all my congregants, Rav Chaim Kanyanevsky. Just to tell you what Ruach HaKodesh is, I could tell you 3 stories, 2 of them personal, almost very close, that basically proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that he has Ruach HaKodesh. I'll tell you one story that happened with me personally. I took one of my students, Benjamin Cohen, to him. Not this past summer of 2013. So he's like 42 years old, he's not married yet, and he's a Kohen, and he has a very good soul. So Rav Chaim told him, you're a Kohen? How could you not have a beard? You're holy, you should have a beard. And he said, Kohen has to be more modest. He said, he was wearing short sleeve. He said, no more should you wear short sleeve. So I said, it's not a joke, Benjamin, it's not a joke. He said, yeah, well, a lot of rabbis blessed me. I said, listen, try to grow the beard. And he said, yeah, the short sleeve I'll do. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. So the next morning in the hotel, we were in the Grand Court Hotel in Jerusalem. He starts shaving. So it was the time of Selichot. So we knock on his door, we say, hey, we want to go to the kotel to pray. So after half an hour, we keep on knocking. Finally, we got scared. We were like, we're going to go call security to go into, because he said I'm shaving. I'll be ready in 5 minutes at like 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. After like half an hour, he wasn't coming out, so he said, Rabbi, I don't want to swear to you. The second I put the shaver to my face to shave, I got vertigo. My head started spinning. And I was afraid I was going to die because, in the bathroom, it's like all marble.
Yeah.
He said, I had to, hold one of the, where you put the towel. So, because, and the reason why I couldn't, I was so dizzy. I said, did you ever have vertigo in your life? No. And we had already been in Israel for 4 or 5 days. So it wasn't like it was jet lag, We were already, so, because he basically, in the taxi back from Bnei Brak to Jerusalem, he had promised me and himself. He said, I said, when you go to a tzaddik, you can't. But I'll tell you another thing. I have 5 daughters, so I went to him. I said, Rabbi, give me a blessing. He said, no, I don't want to. He said, I'll give you a blessing, but this is what you should do. There's a Gemara in Shavuot, page 18, Chai, that says, whoever makes Havdalah, after Shabbat, we have to make Havdalah.
Yeah.
He says, he asked me, he said, what do you make it on? I said, grape juice. He said, don't do that. The Talmud says, whoever makes Havdalah on wine is going to have boys. So from now on, you have to make Havdalah on what?
In wine.
He says, on Pesach and Kiddush, halachically, you are allowed to make Borei Periya Gefen on grape juice. But to get the special blessing of the Gemara to have boys, and he knocked on the table. He said, do this, you'll have boys. Within the year, after 5 girls,
he had a girl. A boy.
A boy, Yaakov Chaim. I named him after Rabbi Weinberg, my Rosh Yeshiva, and my Rosh Yeshiva was from Baltimore, Rabbi Yaakov Ruderman, Rabbi Yaakov Kolevsky, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, and Rav Chaim. His name is Yaakov Chaim. So he's named after the Rosh Yeshivas of Baltimore, which were all Yaakov. And Chaim, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita. It's a true. That's what I'm trying to say. That I don't know. I have to ask his close Gabbaim, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't visit him on a weekly basis. But what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people believe in Chassidut and self-perfection, but nobody wants to make the commitment to actually put time and effort into investing in yourself. So you asked me to talk about Gilgul.
Yeah.
If you are able to break down all the deficiencies and get to that spiritual perfection, there's no reason for you to come back. And I want to tell you something from the Arizal. A lot of people think that Gilgul, you become a dog or a fish or you come back as a rock for different sins. It's very amusing. But the Arizal writes in Shara Gilgulim that the pain and suffering. See, the Ramchal is also going to talk about this. That the greatest pleasure is not sexual. We don't believe in 71 virgins. It's not even the cholent that I just gave you or the sushi.
Yeah.
The greatest pleasure isn't sexual, isn't physical. The greatest pleasure is that your soul goes back and clings back to the light. If you come into this world and God sends us tests, don't forget, every second of our life is a test. To do the right thing or do the wrong thing. So if we come back into this world and we stay happy, which is the biggest mitzvah, like Rav Nachman said, and we don't go for instant gratification like we see in today's society. If we're constantly making the right choices, and especially when we learn the Mesilat Yesherim, it tells us how to jump, go up on the ladder, we will be deserving to go back to where our neshama came from. Mm-hmm. But now the Ramchal, Belineder, after this book, we have to learn the Dat Tevunot, which is more philosophical. He says that, the Zohar says that before we're born, we're like an empty pit. It's Nahama de Kisufa. See, God technically could have sent us straight to heaven, right? He's such a good and wholesome and loving God. Why does he have to test us so much? You know why? Because it's bread of shame. If you don't deserve it, you can't really enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Remember your first paycheck?
Right.
Was that more precious to you or just some random gift that your
first paycheck? Because
you worked for it. The ultimate joy comes. So the Zohar kind of makes this parable. When it's true, God could have given us heaven without us deserving it, but then we would have been like an empty pit. That it would have been shameful. What did you do to deserve your heaven, right? Nahama de Kisufa. But now that we come into this world and we have 101 different tests every day, right? We don't go to steal, we don't cheat, we don't rape, we don't go for instant gratification. Not only that, we break down these barriers, the ego, right? We're not lazy, we run to a mitzvah, right? Even though everybody in LA here is Hollywood mentality, Kim Kardashian mentality, external. We break the kelipot. Then we are truly deserving of what? Then we make our tikkun. Then when we go back to God, God says, "Wow, you had a big roller coaster down there, but you really with all your might, because of your love of heaven and fear of heaven, you." Guys, every second we could choose darkness, which is instant gratification, or light. The Torah. Torah is or. We could take the highway to heaven or the shortcut to hell. So, in life we have to take the ethical high road, even though it's a bumpy and difficult. Is it easy to be a tzaddik? Is it easy to be a hasid? No. But this is something that God demands of us. And Mashiach is coming soon. There's not much more time to do tikkun. So once we're here, we have to really be careful to get to that level. Climb this ladder that the Ramchal is teaching us. and then we won't need to become Gilgul anymore, right? The only reason you have to come back is because you stole from somebody, you didn't respect other people, you had ego, you had deficiencies. But this book is there to teach you what?
How to surpass.
Yeah, to identify the deficiency. Be careful. First of all, we have to know our purpose in the world. So that's his first goal. Then he tells you to be careful not to go after the darkness. Then he tells you to run always towards mitzvah, not to be lazy. These are the different steps on the ladder. So he says, unfortunately, even some very, very wise chachamim people, they say that somebody that wants to put time on musar, it's a waste of time. And if people think I'm a chassid, they think I'm actually egotistic. I'm trying to show off by being a chassid. So there's 101 different excuses why people, they don't put time to introspection, to self-audit. But he wrote this book to know thyself, recognize your deficiencies, and to teach us how to be the most ethical and get to the ultimate level of perfection, where you become humble and so close to God that you can get to the Madriga of Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, at the second part of the class, we're just going to do one short halacha. They asked Rav Ovadia Yosef, this is very, very important because it's actually laughable. We learn it from this week's parasha, Parashat Beshalach. You know that God does probably the most awesome miracle out of all of the 10, which is even above and beyond the 10 miracles that he did for Egypt. It's the splitting of the Red Sea in this week's parasha. And we Jews, we sung such a beautiful song to God, Az Yashir. And you know what Az Yashir says? It's thanking God for destroying the Egyptians. And one of the most beautiful and important part of the song of Az Yashir, we incorporate it every day into our prayer, is what? Ze Eli v'anvehu Elohe Avi v'romemeu. The Jews became so dear and close and beloved and loved God that they pointed to the Shekhinah. They said, this is our God and we will exalt him. So the Talmud learns from here, Anvehu means that you have to make the mitzvot beautiful. From here we learn that, this is the prime example right here. We could have, gotten one piece of cloth, $2 a yard in downtown, and used it as a covering. But here we have to thank the Askarinam family that Ben and Mr. Refal Eric that made the ark. It's a mitzvah that any mitzvah you do, you should do it in the most perfect and beautiful way. Like Bet HaMikdash, everything was gold and marble and, and this ark. Like, do you know what the last mitzvah in the Torah is?
What's the last mitzvah?
There's 613 commandments. Do you know what the last one is? Does anybody know?
No.
Well, you have opportunity to do it. It's to write. Every Jew is commanded to write an entire Sefer Torah. Did you know that?
Really?
Yeah. And so you can go buy a used one, or you can write one not with the nice writing. But because of Ze'eli v'anvehu, God says, you want to, okay, the last mitzvah of the Torah is to write a Torah, right?
Right.
Don't do a halfway job, like messy Torah with messy writing, and the cover is just like a cheap. Have you seen Sephardic Torahs? Some of them are silver. The case costs $10,000. And it's beautiful, designs and engraving. So it's a very big mitzvah that we should do the mitzvah. Like some people, they spend $1,000 on an etrog. You know that? Have you seen the movie Ushpizin? They buy an etrog that doesn't even have one blemish, one even black dot. It's because of this mitzvah. We should do the mitzvot in what?
Perfection.
Perfection. Like the most beautiful. You know why?
Why?
Chatam Sofer says a beautiful thing. He says, there's 3 different meanings. The Chachamim, they explain this pasuk of Ze'eli v'anvehu 3 different ways. The Khatam Sofer in his Chidushim on Mesechet Sukkah, I think page 22, says that Zeli Anveu, I told you. The first thing is to do the mitzvahs in a beautiful way. Because Anveu comes from Na'eh, beautiful. So Anveu, when I do a mitzvah, which is going to lead us into our halacha, that we shouldn't use photocopied mezuzahs or you look for cheap mezuzahs. People spend tens of thousands of dollars on security systems. I want to guarantee you, I'm a rabbi of a big community. I know at least 10 people, they had break-ins the last few months here in LA. And you know what the best thing to keep them out is? Invest in the best mezuzahs. Don't be cheap. I don't want to put myself down, even though we're Persian and Jewish and the Israelis make a lot of jokes about it. It's okay to be cheap, not to buy a fancy car. But for mitzvot, as much as you could afford, be as large, be as...
Right.
So I want to tell you an amazing thing. I'm giving away my Shabbat sermon to you, but it's worth it because it's on video. See, there's another pirush that says Zeh li v'anveu is you have to become close to God. That's what the Mesilat Yesherim we just talked about. We have to emulate God. Just like we know God is merciful, because anvehu means ani vehu. We kind of have to be like, like when we were kids, Michael Jordan, you say you want to be like Mike?
Yeah.
That's wrong. We want to be like God. So whatever action we see God does, like if we see God is full of kindness, what do we have to do? We have to be full of kindness. Okay. And the third, if you look at Onkelos, the third meaning of Zeli Vandel, you know what it is?
No.
That we have to build, the Jews, they made a neder. They said, because God did this amazing, marvelous, unbelievable miracle of the Red Sea, we're going to build him a beautiful Bet HaMikdash. So the Khatam Sofer says all three meanings are one thing. Why do we have to build a Bet HaMikdash full of gold and the most, like the Kohen Gadol,
Yeah.
He had diamonds and why do we have to build such a beautiful thing for God? And why does the Bet HaMikdash have to be the best materials? You know why? Because it all goes back to one thing. The ultimate reason why we came into this world is to copy God, emulate God. You know what? Today I was walking in Pacific Palisades by the Pacific Ocean, and we found some beautiful red rocks and blue rocks, and we saw some very exotic birds. God has created a world with literally millions of different colors in nature. Look at a rainbow. Look at the waterfalls. Look at the ocean. Look at the mountains. Do you remember when television, you're in security, remember when the computer screens, you guys maybe don't remember this, I'm a little bit older than you, but TV used to be black and white.
Yeah.
Could God technically have created a world? We could have survived if God would have created a world where there was no parrots or rainbow of colors, right?
Right, yeah.
But God, since He loves us so much, He created such a beautiful, exotic, a world where you look at the beak. We have a member in the Kenisa. He's a nuclear scientist, but now he's retired. He travels all around the Amazon and the world. He brings back pictures of like these parrots and these, a toucan. You look at like the beak of a toucan bird, it's like a rainbow of, even a duck. If you look at its head, it has a beautiful green. God has created a world of rainbows. So God is the best artist. He created such a beautiful, magnificent world. So we also have to copy that. Not for our personal life, but when we do a mitzvah, we're giving back, we're kind of like Kivyachol giving a gift back to God, right? God gave us the ultimate gift. Such a beautiful world with the, just look at the different, how many different roses and flowers there are out there? Mm-hmm. We technically could have survived without them. This is just the cream of the cherry on top, where God loves us so much. So our response to that is also when we build an ark, it's like we're giving back to Him. It's in His honor. Should we be cheap? Or should we be like Him and build the most beautiful and extravagant?
Got it. Yeah.
So it's all coming back to that. That's why the Bet HaMikdash has to be so beautiful. That's why when we do the mitzvahs, it should be the most beautiful. So it brings it back me to a question. that it's very important for our Jewish brothers and sisters to know. They asked Rav Ovadia Yosef, is it okay to use a Mezuza to your house that's been photocopied? And unfortunately, a lot of Jews that are not so well connected, they go by Mezuza from anybody. But I wanted to say something here. Just like we buy meat, can you just buy meat from anybody just because he says it's kosher? It has to have what? Certification. So therefore, the place that you buy your sisit, your mezuzah, your tefillin, it's better to figure out exactly who wrote that mezuzah or tefillin, or at least the person you're buying from should be like a very, very well-known sofer or rabbi, because guess what? Halachically, even on Shabbat, it's not so important to eat meat. So, like me personally, I'm not trying to have meat during the week, only on Shabbats. I'm on a diet, but
it's better not to have meat.
Yeah, because also kashrut, I know one of my mentors, Harav Ben David, also, I never see the meat during the week. But what I'm trying to say is that tefillin you have to put on every day. And mezuzah, I told you, it's the best. These Rabbi Heinemann, the rabbi from Baltimore, he says it's ridiculous. Some people, they spend millions of dollars on the house and on the spa and the pool, and when they come to the mezuzah, they want to buy the cheapest one. Or they're not careful to buy from the person that's God-fearing. But like I said before, the best security system that not only keeps out criminals, it also keeps out evil eye, it keeps out even spiritual negativity from your house is what?
Mezuzah.
Mezuzah, because the mezuzah is Shaddai. On the mezuzah it says Shin. It means Shomer Daltot Israel. It keeps the bad, evil Shedim, the evil spirits also out of your house. So can you imagine? It's the ultimate security system. It keeps out the criminals and the evil spirit and evil eye.
Wow.
And it protects you even when you're not at your house. You know that. So anyways, this week's class is going to be less focused on the halacha because we need to call it a night. But to make a long story short, we know, God forbid, when somebody has to write his wife, Rav Ovadia Yosef in Yahaveh Da'at, the 6th portion, Siman Nun Zayin 57 talks about this. And he says, even though we know that in the Talmud it says that when somebody wants to write his wife divorce, is he allowed to print it on the computer and say you're divorced? No. It says the katavla. He clearly has to what? A sofer has to write it. So the same thing, a Torah, like I told you, the last mitzvah of a Torah, or like we read in the Shema Yisrael, to write a mezuzah, it says, Uchtaftam al mezuzot petecha uvisharecha. So therefore, it's elementary that a photocopy wouldn't be allowed. Because the Torah is ketiva. When the Torah says ketiva, it means a human being with a special black ink, dio, should write it on a parchment. So there's a very, very big rabbi, one of the main commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, his name is Rabbi David, the Taz, TORAH Zahav. The TORAH Zahav has a very interesting opinion. He holds that, do you remember have you seen an old typewriter? He says that, and the old books used to print it like this. Our modern books are not printed like, it's not, have you seen the old books? It's like,
yeah,
press. It's like a press. It's like a press, like a typewriter. It hits it. So the opinion of the Taz is that is acceptable for a get. And he actually says that he holds that like a chumash that is printed in a press, since it's pressed down, the ink goes into it based on what the Gemara and Daf Chav says in the Gittin, and he holds you have to deal with it with a lot of holiness. So Rav Ovadia brings from one of the greatest Kabbalists, which actually this week's parsha we learn about at Man. So I want to just go off on a tangent here. What blessing did they say on Man?
Which blessing do you have?
For 40 years, what did the Jews eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? They didn't have really. It was
How
breakfast.
much matzah?
No, man, the heavenly food.
What?
Yeah, you didn't know? A food came from heaven. It would rain every day, like kind of like a drizzle we're having it. But it would rain food. You didn't know that, man?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Is it tovu metiv?
Good. So what do you think, Yigal? So I'll tell you. The Ramami Pano in his book Asara Ma'amarot, he says the bracha they made was hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. Because it's called lechem. You know, the Torah calls it lechem. But what do we say on bread? Hamotzi lechem mean?
Yeah.
But they had to say hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. So the Ramami Pano wants to say that even if you want to acknowledge that the Taz, the Turei Zahav, Rabbeinu David, says that you can, God forbid, if it's necessary, you need to write a divorce document, you can typewrite it or write it on a press. But he says there's no way in the world you can accept that for a tefillin or mezuzah or sefer Torah. And Rav Ovadia goes here through a very, very long thing. You know, another thing that's very necessary when you write a mezuzah is that you have to, before you write it down, you have to engrave the lines. Like you take a thing and you carve in the lines, not with ink, but with the...
It's like a razor?
Yeah, like a razor. So when the guy writes the mezuzah, it will be on a straight line. It's called sirtut. So can you do that when it's a photocopy? No, you can't. So basically...
it's that detailed.
Yeah. So basically, the Rav Ovadia at the end of the Teshuvah says, "V'yesh lo osiv shafilu la'ataz ezyato." He says, first of all, even if you want to say the Taz would accept a mezuzah that was like pressed down, like made on a press or on a typewriter, but for sure photocopy. Even there's no opinion in the world that accepts photocopies. And almost everybody argues on the Taz. A tefillin has to be handwritten by a God-fearing Jew, and you know why some mezuzahs are super expensive, Shlomo Chaim? Because every time the sofer wants to write the name of God, he got to the mikveh. Like some Torahs are like $100,000, $50,000 Sephardi Torahs. You know why? Every time the sofer wanted to write the name of God, he went to the mikveh before.
Yeah, that's another question.
And also, he was a very big Kabbalist. So what I'm trying to say is that unfortunately, one of the best favors you can do for your friends and family, your grandparents, people that unfortunately don't come to our class here and don't have much knowledge of Torah, a lot of people, the mezuzahs they have on their doors are bogus. Why are they bogus? Either they're photocopied, they're written by Arabs. There's many people in Jerusalem. They sell mezuzahs to reform and non-knowing Jews. And yeah, there's a guy in the Arab shuk. He saw an Arab writing him,
No.
A tourist comes, he doesn't know. There's a lot of money for it. You can sell it for $40, $50. So therefore, the same way that we Jews, we have to buy kosher meat from OU, it has to have an OU on it, right? A mezuzah, in a way, is much more sensitive and important. So any of these holy objects you buy, you should make sure they're written by who? You should buy it from only somebody that's very trustworthy, God-fearing Jew. And there's no question in the world that photocopied mezuzah is not acceptable. And the reason why I talked about this in this week's parsha is because our response, God created a beautiful world for us. So when we put the sign that this Jewish is a Jewish home, should you be cheap mezuzah or should you buy the most expensive one you could afford?
Expensive one.
You should buy the most expensive one, not just because of expensive, and usually I want to let you know, as a matter of fact, the larger they are, the easier it is to, it's common sense. The ones that are very, very small, it's much harder for the sofer to be able to write the words properly. So usually it's better to go with one that's at least like 4, 5, 6 inches. At Ben Gurion is one of the biggest mezuzahs in the world. You'll see, it's Shlomo Chaim was saying a big Kabbalist, but you should know that in Israel there was a few bus accidents, like kind of like a bus fell off a cliff, and I heard this in Arachim in a seminar. They went and checked. They saw every Jew that had kosher tefillin and mezuzah. Let's say 100 people were on the bus when it fell off the cliff in Israel. Every single Jew that had a kosher mezuzah and tefillin didn't die.
Wow.
So this is a matter of life and death. And I also want to tell you a very other important halacha about mezuzah is that mezuzah need to be checked every 3.5 years.
Why?
Because from the we're afraid that it rains, sunshine. We want to make sure that the mezuzah, because two things are very bad for. By the way, your tefillin also, if you take a shower and you put it on your tefillin right after, it's very dangerous because the
water can go.
Water, right? The water and ink is not good.
Yeah.
Because water erases ink.
Yeah.
So. Actually, I want to let you know, some very righteous people, Hasidut people, every Elul, every month before Rosh Hashanah, they check their tefillin and mezuzah. But tefillin, you don't need to do that. Rav Ovadia holds, if it was written by a very, very God-fearing sofer, some people do it every 7 years or whatever. But there's a halacha that Rav Chaim Kanievsky brings this also in a sefer that it says in the Talmud, it's a halacha. Twice every 7 years, you have to check your mezuzot to make sure that your security,
Yeah.
because the words sometimes, after time it can melt or because of the heat or different elements.
Yeah.
So it means once every 3.5 years, you should check your mezuzot. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you so much.
Berliner, see you next week.
Chazaka Baruch.